The maintenance tunnels of Helios Station's lowest level had become Cashin's sanctuary over the past 4 years. Here among the humming coolant pipes and flickering emergency lights, nobody questioned why a former senior communications specialist now spent his days fixing broken circuit relays. Nobody remembered his fall from grace or the classified reports he'd filed that mysteriously vanished from station archives. Power fluctuation detected in Sector 17B, announced the station's automated system, its feminine voice echoing through the narrow corridor. Maintenance requested. Cashin adjusted his tool belt and reached for his diagnostic scanner. Sector 17B wasn't on his assigned rotation, but he welcomed the diversion. The emptier sectors meant fewer suspicious glances from security personnel who still treated him as potentially seditious. "I'm on it," he muttered to the empty corridor, knowing the system would log his response. The route to 17B took him through rarely used passages, where the station's pristine white aesthetic gave way to exposed conduits and industrial grating. As he turned the final corner, his scanner began registering unusual readings, electromagnetic pulses in patterns too regular to be system malfunctions. Cashin paused, studying the readout. 4 years of exile hadn't dulled his expertise in communication signals. These weren't random power surges, they were structured almost like language. Following the signal led him to an abandoned storage bay. The door's access panel had been overridden with a crude bypass that made him smile despite himself. Someone had skill, if not finesse. Inside, the storage bay was dark except for emergency lighting casting long shadows between stacked containers. The signal grew stronger as he moved deeper into the room. It was coming from behind a partially collapsed shelf unit. "Hello," he called softly. "I'm just maintenance, not security." The pulses stopped abruptly. Complete silence fell. Cashin set down his tools and raised empty hands. "I'm not going to report anything. I'm probably the least popular person with station administration anyway." A soft rustling came from behind the containers. Then a figure emerged hesitantly into the dim light. She wasn't human. Her skin was pale blue with a subtle iridescence that seemed to shift with her movements. Where a human would have hair, she had what appeared to be sensitive tendrils that rippled gently around her face. Her eyes, large, entirely silver with no visible pupils, regarded him with unmistakable intelligence and fear. Cashin recognized her species instantly, though he'd only seen them in restricted files. A resonant from the Procyon system. Their civilization had made contact with humanity 30 years ago, but diplomatic relations had collapsed mysteriously 5 years back. Now they were classified as potentially hostile and subjects of scientific interest to the Galactic Research Division. The alien woman backed away as he processed this realization. From her throat came a series of delicate pulses, not sound but electromagnetic frequencies that made his scanner chirp in response. "You're trying to communicate," he said, glancing at his scanner, "but I don't have the right equipment to translate." She tilted her head, tendrils waving in what might have been frustration. Then she pointed to her temple and then to his. "Direct neural communication," Cashin guessed. "Your kind are telepathic with compatible species." She nodded, the gesture strikingly human. Cashin hesitated. Allowing an alien consciousness into his mind violated about 17 station protocols. But his curiosity and something in her silver eyes made him nod slowly. "Okay, just be gentle, first time and all that." The resonant approached cautiously. She raised her hand, 4 long fingers with an extra joint, and placed it lightly against his temple. Her skin was cool and smooth against his. The connection wasn't what he expected. No invasion of thoughts, no loss of self. Rather, it felt like opening a door to a room he hadn't known existed in his mind. Concepts and emotions flowed through this new space, not words exactly, but meanings that his brain translated into understanding. "I am Novia, you are not afraid." The thought carried surprise and question. "I'm Cashin," he replied aloud, finding it easier to speak. "And no, not afraid, curious. Why are you hiding here?" Images flashed through the connection. Sterile laboratory rooms, humans in research uniforms, pain as they extracted neural tissue, escaped through ventilation systems, hiding in the darkness of the station's lower levels for what felt like weeks. Cashin pulled back, breaking the connection. "You escaped from the research division." His voice hardened. "They were experimenting on you." Novia nodded, her tendrils darkening to a deep indigo that somehow conveyed distress without words. "How long have you been down here?" She held up 7 fingers, then pointed to the station's lighting system that simulated day cycles. "7 days, you must be starving." Cashin reached into his work pack and pulled out his meal ration. "I don't know if this is compatible with your biology, but it's better than nothing." Novia examined the protein bar cautiously before taking a small bite. Her expression, what he could read of it, suggested it wasn't delicious but would suffice. She pointed to her throat and shook her head. Water, I have some, he offered his canteen. As she drank, Cashin realized the dangerous position he now occupied. Harboring an escaped research subject would earn him far worse than demotion and exile if discovered. The smart move would be to leave now, report a false reading on the power fluctuation, and pretend this encounter never happened. Instead, he found himself asking, "Do you have somewhere safe to stay?" Novia gestured around the storage bay with a movement that eloquently conveyed its inadequacy. Right, Cashin ran a hand through his short brown hair. Look, I have quarters in Section 12. It's not much, but it's private. Security never bothers with routine checks there since it's all low-level maintenance staff. Her silver eyes studied him, clearly assessing his intentions. I can help you, he said softly, if you want. Novia placed her hand against his temple again. The connection reopened. Why would you risk yourself for me? Images from his own memory surfaced. His reports about resource allocation irregularities, discovering the classified research project, his demotion when he asked too many questions, the friends who disavowed him. Because I know what it's like when nobody believes you, he answered simply, and because some things are worth the risk. After a moment's consideration, Novia nodded. Her tendrils lightened to a soft lavender that somehow expressed cautious hope. Cashin checked his scanner for security patrols. We'll need to be careful, follow exactly where I go, and if I signal you to hide, do it immediately. As they slipped from the storage bay into the dim corridor, Cashin felt something he hadn't experienced in years, a purpose beyond mere survival. Whatever came next, he couldn't help feeling that the universe had aligned their paths for a reason. Behind them, the storage bay door sealed with a soft hiss, closing one chapter as another tentatively began. Cashin's quarters resembled a communications hub more than living space. Salvaged equipment lined the walls, monitoring devices blinked with steady rhythms, and handcrafted signal jammers ensured privacy from the station's surveillance systems. It had been his sanctuary for 4 years, now it sheltered 2. 3 weeks had passed since he'd brought Novia to his home, 3 weeks of careful adaptation and growing trust. He'd crafted a rudimentary translator using discarded neural interface components, allowing them to communicate without the prolonged physical contact that left both mentally exhausted. Your language has 27 distinct empathic tones, Cashin observed as he fine-tuned the translator. But our translation database only recognizes 16. Novia sat cross-legged on his spare cot, her tendrils shifting to a thoughtful blue-green. The neural interface around her neck pulsed as she responded. The missing tones express concepts humans rarely communicate explicitly, the translator rendered in a melodic feminine voice. The separation between emotion and thought is uniquely human. How so? Cashin asked, genuinely curious. Their evening discussions had become his favorite part of each day. For resonance, to know is to feel. To communicate anger without acknowledging its roots in fear would be incomprehensible. Her tendrils rippled. Yet humans do this constantly. Cashin smiled ruefully. That's probably why we're so messed up as a species. A soft chime from his security monitor interrupted them. Cashin moved quickly to the display, studying the feed from the cameras he'd illicitly installed throughout the maintenance sector. Security patrol, he muttered. Third one today, they're increasing their sweeps. Novia's tendrils darkened with concern. They suspect I'm still aboard. Maybe, or maybe it's routine. Either way, we should be careful. Cashin watched the uniformed officers move methodically through the corridor. No bioscanners this time, at least. When the patrol passed, Novia approached his workbench where components of a damaged communication array lay scattered. Her four-fingered hand hovered over the pieces. May I? Cashin nodded, curious. He'd noticed her fascination with his work but hadn't pressed. With surprising dexterity, Novia began assembling the components in configurations he wouldn't have considered. Her tendrils pulsed with subtle electromagnetic frequencies that seemed to test the circuitry as she worked. You understand these systems, he observed. I was a communications specialist too, the translator conveyed, before the diplomatic collapse. The coincidence made him smile. What are the odds? Higher than you might think. Her silver eyes met his. Those drawn to understanding signals often share certain attributes regardless of species. Something in her gaze made his heart beat faster. Over the past weeks, their conversations had grown increasingly personal. He'd told her about his family on Earth whom he hadn't seen in 12 years, about his passion for unlocking communication barriers. She'd shared stories of her homeworld, a place of crystalline structures where thoughts flowed freely between individuals in what she called the resonance. There, she said, connecting the final component. The array hummed to life, its efficiency readings higher than factory specifications. That's impressive, Cashin admitted. You've reconfigured the frequency modulator entirely. It will catch signals your systems normally filter as background radiation. Her tendrils shifted to a color he'd come to recognize as pride. My people's communications exist in these ranges. The implications hit him. You could potentially contact your homeworld. No, she said quickly. The distance is too great without amplification, but I might detect other resonance, if any survived. The pain in her voice was unmistakable. According to official reports, the diplomatic breakdown had resulted from resonant aggression. But Novia's memories, which she'd cautiously shared through their neural connection, told a different story. Of researchers who became too interested in resonant telepathy. Of specimens who never returned to diplomatic quarters. We'll find them, Cashin promised impulsively, once we get you safely off this station. A plan had been forming in his mind. The monthly supply ship would dock in 8 days. With his maintenance credentials and some creative reprogramming, he might get her aboard. It was risky but possible. Novia's response was interrupted by a sudden shudder that ran through her body. Her tendrils contracted painfully, and she clutched at the neural interface. Novia, Cashin rushed to her side as she sank to her knees. Neural feedback, she managed through the translator. From the experiments, delayed reaction. He helped her to the cot. This had happened twice before, episodes of pain that left her weakened for hours. Each time, the symptoms worsened. What can I do? He asked, feeling helpless. Through their months of isolation, Cashin had assembled a basic medical kit with supplies pilfered from station inventories. Nothing in it would help with neural damage. It will pass, she assured him, though her tendrils remained a distressed gray. The connection between body and mind heals differently for my kind. Cashin made a decision. You need proper medical attention. I can't provide that, but I know someone who might help. Novia's eyes widened in alarm. No others, not safe. Talia isn't just anyone, he explained. She was my colleague before. Everything works in medical research, the legitimate kind. She helped me when administration turned against me. You trust her with both our lives. The question was fair. He hadn't spoken to Talia in nearly 2 years, their friendship another casualty of his fall from grace. But he remembered her integrity, her quiet defiance of protocols she deemed unjust. Yes, he said with more confidence than he felt. But I'll need to leave you alone to contact her. Our communication has to be in person, nothing electronic. Novia's hand found his, her cool fingers intertwining with his warm ones. The gesture seemed universal across species, comfort, connection, trust. Then go, she said softly, I will manage until your return. Their eyes held for a long moment. Something had been growing between them, something neither had named but both felt. A connection that transcended their biological differences. Impulsively, Cashin leaned forward and pressed his forehead gently against hers, a resonant gesture of affection she'd explained once. Her tendrils brushed his face, soft as silk, and shifted to a warm rose color he'd never seen before. I'll be back before next cycle, he promised, reluctantly pulling away. Stay hidden. As he prepared to leave, Novia called his name. When he turned, she had removed the translator. She placed her hand to her temple, asking permission. He nodded, and the mental connection opened between them. Instead of words or images, what flowed through their bond was pure emotion. Gratitude, concern, and something deeper, warmer, that made his chest tighten with unexpected joy. I'll be careful, he whispered, knowing she understood. The corridors of Helios Station seemed colder and more sterile than ever as Cashin made his way toward the medical section. His thoughts remained with the alien woman who had transformed his exile into something unexpectedly precious. Finding Talia would be risky, convincing her to help risk her still. But as he passed through the security checkpoint with his maintenance credentials, Cashin felt more certain of his purpose than he had in years. Some connections, whether between minds or hearts, were worth fighting for, even across the void between worlds.